Fog, thick, heavy, and cold. It rolled in from the sea, creeping over the land like a living entity, swallowing everything in its path. The world around me disappeared, consumed by the dense, impenetrable mist. It was as if the fog had a mind of its own, seeking to isolate and ensnare anyone who dared to venture into its embrace. It clung to me like a shroud, a damp, suffocating blanket. Each step I took felt like wading through a thick, viscous substance, slowing my movements and sapping my strength. The coldness of the fog seeped into my bones, chilling me to the core. It was a relentless, oppressive presence that refused to let go. Visibility was minimal, a few feet at most. Shapes and shadows loomed out of the mist, only to vanish as quickly as they appeared. The world beyond my immediate surroundings was a mystery, hidden behind a curtain of white. I strained my eyes, trying to pierce the fog, but it was futile. The fog was an impenetrable barrier, concealing whatever lay beyond. I felt lost, adrift in a sea of white. There were no landmarks, no familiar sights to guide me. Every direction looked the same, an endless expanse of fog. It was disorienting, a labyrinth with no clear path. I had to rely on my instincts, hoping they would lead me to safety. The air hung heavy, pregnant with moisture and an eerie silence. It was the kind of silence that pressed down on you, making you acutely aware of every sound, every breath. The usual noises of the world were muffled, swallowed by the fog. It was as if the fog had created its own world, separate from the one I knew. It was the kind of silence that screamed in your ears. The absence of sound was deafening, amplifying the beating of my heart and the rush of blood in my veins. Every footstep, every rustle of clothing seemed magnified, echoing in the stillness. It was unnerving, a constant reminder of my isolation. My breath caught in my throat. The air was thick, almost tangible, making it difficult to breathe. Each inhalation felt like drawing in water, heavy and suffocating. I had to force myself to take slow, measured breaths, fighting the urge to panic. The fog seemed to tighten around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something wasn't right. This fog was unnatural. It felt alive, malevolent. There was a sense of being watched, of unseen eyes tracking my every move. It was a primal fear, an instinctive reaction to a threat I couldn't see but could feel all around me. I could sense it, watching me, feeling me. The fog seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a malevolent force that sought to ensnare and consume. I had to keep moving, to find a way out before it was too late. The fog's embrace was suffocating, a relentless grip that threatened to pull me under. I had to escape, to break free from its clutches and find my way back to the world of light and clarity. I was alone, utterly alone. I'd been driving for hours, the monotony broken only by the rhythmic swish of the windshield wipers. My destination, a remote cabin in the woods, a sanctuary from the city's noise and chaos. Now I wasn't so sure. The fog had descended without warning, swallowing the road and the world around me. My headlights, usually reassuring beams cutting through the darkness, were now feeble glimmers, barely penetrating the dense white curtain. I pressed on, my unease growing with every passing mile. Then I heard it, a whisper, faint and indistinct, carried on the wind. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I stopped the car, my heart pounding against my ribs. I strained my ears, listening intently. Silence. Had I imagined it? A trick of the fog playing on my already frayed nerves? I told myself it had to be, but deep down, a seed of doubt had been planted. I started the engine, the sound loud in the oppressive silence. As I continued driving, the whisper came again. This time it was closer, more insistent. It sent shivers down my spine. I couldn't understand the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was a whisper of fear, of warning. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my knuckles turning white. The fog seemed to be closing in, suffocating me. My heart pounded a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I had to get out of this fog. I spotted a faint light in the distance, a beacon of hope in the swirling white abyss. The fog was so thick that it felt like I was wading through a sea of ghosts, each step heavier than the last. The light flickered, almost as if it were calling out to me, guiding me through the oppressive darkness. It was a small diner, its neon sign casting a sickly yellow glow. Relief washed over me. The sign buzzed and flickered, struggling to stay lit, much like my own dwindling hope. The building looked old and worn, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. Yet in that moment, it was a sanctuary, a promise of warmth and safety. Maybe I could find shelter, call for help. The thought of a warm cup of coffee and a phone to call for assistance filled me with a renewed sense of purpose. I imagined the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of a friendly voice. breaking the eerie silence that surrounded me. As I approached, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to be coming from the fog itself, as if the mist was alive and trying to communicate with me. The voices were unintelligible, a cacophony of murmurs that sent chills down my spine. It felt like the fog was closing in, suffocating me with its eerie presence. They seemed to be all around me now, closing in. The whispers grew more frantic, almost desperate, as if they were warning me of something. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat echoing in the silence. I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead as I quickened my pace, the light of the diner my only focus. I parked the car and ran towards the diner, my breath catching in my throat. The door was locked. Panic set in as I realized I was still trapped in the fog, the whispers growing louder and more menacing. I pounded on the door, hoping someone inside would hear me and let me in. I rattled it, desperate, but it wouldn't budge. The whispers were now a deafening roar, surrounding me, suffocating me. I felt a sense of dread wash over me as I realized I was truly alone, with no escape from the fog and its sinister whispers. My hands trembled as I continued to pound on the door, my pleas for help swallowed by the mist. I turned back to the fog, my heart sinking. I was trapped. The whispers surrounded me, swirling around me like the fog itself. They were clearer now, filled with a cold, mocking laughter. They spoke of things unseen, of horrors lurking just beyond my perception. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps. My mind raced, trying to make sense of the impossible. What were these whispers? What did they want? I felt a cold dread creep into my bones, chilling me to the core. Suddenly, through the cacophony of whispers, I heard a new sound. A rhythmic thumping, distant at first but growing steadily louder. It was the unmistakable sound of a helicopter. Hope surged through me, chasing away the fear for a fleeting moment. They were searching for me. I had to signal them. I fumbled in my pockets for my phone, but my fingers were clumsy, numb with fear. The whispers mocked my desperation, their laughter echoing in my ears. Section 8. False Dawn. The helicopter drew closer, its searchlight cutting through the fog like a beacon. I stumbled towards the light, waving my arms frantically. But as quickly as it had appeared, the light began to fade, the thumping of the blades receding into the distance. I sank to my knees, my last shred of hope extinguished. The whispers seemed to roar in my ears, triumphant, mocking. I was alone, lost in the fog with the whispers. This was to be my fate. Section 9. Surrounded by whispers. I closed my eyes, surrendering to the inevitable. The whispers pressed in on me, their icy touch seeping into my skin. I felt myself falling, tumbling into an abyss of despair. The world around me dissolved into a swirling vortex of white and sound. Then, silence. The whispers faded, replaced by an eerie calm. I opened my eyes, my body trembling. The fog began to dissipate, revealing a faint glimmer of light in the distance. Section 10. The fog recedes. I stumbled to my feet, drawn towards the light like a moth to a flame. The light was mesmerizing, almost hypnotic, pulling me forward with an irresistible force. Each step felt heavy, as if the fog itself was trying to hold me back, but I pressed on, determined to reach the source of the glow. As I walked, the fog continued to recede, revealing a familiar landscape. Trees and bushes that had been shrouded in mist began to take shape, their outlines becoming clearer with each passing moment. The once eerie and foreboding forest now seemed less menacing, as if the lifting fog was also lifting the weight of fear from my heart. The road, my car, the diner, all were exactly where I had left them. It was as if time had stood still, preserving everything in a state of suspended animation. The diner with its flickering neon sign looked almost welcoming now, a stark contrast to the ominous presence it had held in the fog. The fog was gone, vanished as quickly as it had arrived. It was as if it had never been there, leaving no trace of its existence. The air felt lighter, and I could breathe freely again, no longer oppressed by the suffocating mist. The sun broke through the clouds, bathing the world in a warm golden light. The transformation was almost magical, turning the once gloomy and dark landscape into a scene of beauty and tranquility. The golden rays of the sun seemed to chase away the last remnants of the fog, leaving behind a world that felt renewed and alive. The air was clear, the silence now peaceful and serene. The sounds of nature began to fill the air, birds chirping, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze, and the distant hum of life returning to normal. It was a stark contrast to the eerie silence that had accompanied the fog, a silence that had been filled with dread and uncertainty. It was as if the nightmare of the fog had never been. The fear and confusion that had gripped me were now just a distant memory, fading away like the mist itself. I felt a sense of relief and gratitude, thankful to have emerged from the ordeal unscathed. The world around me was the same, yet it felt different, brighter, more vibrant, and full of promise. The fog had receded, taking with it the darkness and leaving behind a renewed sense of hope and clarity. Section 11, The Chilling Truth. I reached my car, my body still trembling from the ordeal. As I sat behind the wheel, my eyes fell on the rearview mirror. And that's when I saw it, reflected in the glass, behind me, in the diner window. A face, pale, gaunt, with eyes that burned with an unholy light, and on its lips, a faint, chilling smile. The whispers hadn't followed me out of the fog, they were inside my head.